Our word today is going to be on germination. Anybody know what germination is? Yeah. Germination is a big word that means when a seed begins to sprout. That very first sprouting of the seed, the beginning of a plant, that is germination. And that's what we're going to work with a little bit today in our gizmo. But first we need to talk about vocabulary. At the top of your sheet you see that there's a vocabulary section with a few words. Some of them we've talked about. Some of them are going to be new to us today. So let's go over those first. First one is a controlled experiment. We've seen that in our learning target, but we haven't really given that a definition. Does anybody have an idea of what a controlled experiment might be?
A safe and experiment that you have control over.
Yeah. So a controlled experiment is an experiment that you control everything except for one independent variable. You only change one thing. If you remember, a control was that normal that we talked about with variables. This is a little bit different. A controlled experiment is an experiment that only has one independent variable. Every reliable scientific experiment should be controlled, right? If you think back to our car and ramp lab, at the beginning, it was really hard to guess who was going to have the fastest time because there was two variables. There was different gates and different heights. So it was really hard. When we just changed our height and kept our photo gates the same, you guys could compare the different heights to see how fast the car, which one would be fastest for the car, because you only changed one thing. In a controlled experiment, you're only changing one thing, ever, right? Only one independent variable, okay? So that's our controlled experiment. Next is germinate. And that's what we just talked about with germination. That's when that seed just begins to sprout, okay? That's the first beginning of a plant. From a seed to a plant. A hypothesis. We've done a little bit of work with this one. Who can give me a definition of a hypothesis? Marn?
A hypothesis is an educated guess.
Yeah, a hypothesis is going to be your educated guess. Using what you know, what you've observed, what do you think is going to happen in the experiment? A hypothesis is something that you write or think of before you do the experiment, and it's your educated guess on what's going to happen. Okay, our next one is mean. I'm not talking about bullies. Mean, this is a math word. It means the same as average. Mean and average are the exact same thing. So in our airplane trial, we found an average. In our heart rate lab, we found average heart rate.
We found the mean.
Yep, we found the mean. Average and mean are the same. Who remembers how you calculate the average or the mean? Ace?
So you get like, I'll just reference to the heart lab. So we had 5 people, because we did another group. So you would take each one of their heart rates and add them all up, and then divide it by 5.
Yeah, perfect. So we said when they did the heart lab, they had 5 members. And so to find the average of those 5 scores, the middle number, which is what an average is, a mean, they added them all up, and then they divided by 5. If they had only had 3 people or 3 numbers they were trying to find the mean of, they would add those 3 numbers up and divide by 3, right? You will be finding the mean in our lab today and tomorrow. So if when we get to that part you have a little bit of questions or want a little bit of a refresh on that, just raise your hand, okay? When you're finding the mean or the average, because you're dividing, you oftentimes get a decimal point. Well, today we're talking about number of seeds, so you can't really have 0.5 of a seed, right? No. So we're going to have to round. When you're rounding, you need to look to the number just to the right of the decimal point. If that number is 4 or below, then you're going to just ignore the entire decimal point and keep your number the same. If the number to the right of the decimal point is 5 or above, you're going to bump your number up by 1 and then forget about the decimal point. Okay? That's just a reminder of rounding. Our next vocab word is seed. I'm sure you all are familiar with what a seed is. That is the basic reproductive unit of a plant. That is how plants reproduce. Okay, and then a trial. What is a trial? When we're talking about an experiment, what is a trial? Yeah.
A trial of the experiment?
Yeah. It's one run of the experiment, right? One test of your experiment. One time going through the procedure of your experiment. Okay? And then the last one is a variable. Always think of the word varying when you hear variable. A variable is something that changes. Okay? That's definition for a variable. So to get started for our lab, we're going to do a little bit of a prior knowledge question. It says, plants that produce fruit or vegetables grow from seeds.